Everyone. Just checking on my LinkedIn that we're live now. Um, Let me put this on here. Should be online in any minute. So I'll just keep an eye on it. It's a bit delayed. It starts a bit late, but welcome everyone. Oops, sorry. It's now just reducing the volume. Welcome everyone to the October live session Q&A. I'm really excited for the topic today. We're speaking about digital twins. I'll introduce quickly myself for people who know Fran, because I know that he also shared the link on his YouTube channel. So my name is Fatima El-Wakeel. As a practitioner, I work in data strategy, worked across different organizations and industries, automotive, FMCG, consulting, hospitality, and others. I'm also an academic, so I do research in the University of Cambridge, again in data strategy. So my focus is data strategy. I have with me here Fran. So Fran is a digital tech and analytics consultant. He's the digital twin expert, actually. So we'll be discussing a lot about his research. He's a practitioner and academic as well. He's part of the Institute for Manufacturing in the University of Cambridge. So welcome, Fran.
Thank you, Fatima. How are you doing?
Really excited about our discussion today. So have my coffee and I'm all ready to kind of discuss really your the paper that you've written. And I'm really lucky to have the paper with me today. So I'll share the link on the comments afterwards in both YouTube and LinkedIn. But it's such a great research, Fran.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
I just thought maybe we can bring our listeners first up to speed. Let's speak a bit about digital twins and maybe start by explaining what do we mean by digital twins?
Yeah. So the simplest definition that I've been able to come up with digital twins is that it's a high fidelity model of a physical asset that updates synchronously throughout the asset's life cycle. And if you look at the literature, if you look at what industry is saying in general, there's always different definitions, slightly different definitions here and there, but they all share similar aspects to them. And these similar characteristics, they can be divided into six. The first one is that for a digital twin consists of a physical asset that is coupled to a digital model. So if the model is not tied to an existing physical asset, then you just have a model. You don't have a digital twin. The second characteristic is that the data collection for this model has to be done synchronously. And what I mean by that is that the data collection has to be collected at a rate that allows you to model the things, to represent the things that you want to represent with your model. So, for example, let's take the example of an aircraft engine. If you wanted to represent the vibration behavior of that engine, you will have to collect the data very quickly. If you were to represent the variation in water depth in a dam, then the data collection might not have to be so quick. Let me see sorry, I think my audio is not great.
Yeah,
Is that better now?
it's better now. It's a lot
Okay.
better now. If it happens
Okay,
again,
cool.
I'll just interrupt you. So
All right, yeah. Yeah, so we were number 2. Number 3. Well, were the first 2 points clear? Could you hear the first 2 points?
can you repeat the second one? Because I think
Yeah,
the
okay.
linkage to the data asset, yes, that was clear. The second one is where the voice went a bit fast.
Yeah, okay, cool. So the second one is that the data collection for of the digital twin has to be done synchronously. And what I mean by that is that the data has to be collected at a rate that allows you to represent the phenomena that you want to twin. So for example, if you have an aircraft engine and you want to represent the vibration behavior of that engine, you will have to collect data very quickly. Whereas if you wanted to represent something else like the change in depth of a dam, of the water level in the dam, you don't need to collect the data so quickly. Um, so that's it for number two. Number three is that there has to be a bi-directional connection between the model and the physical asset. And what that means is that the digital twin is updated with data coming from the physical asset, but at the same time, the digital twin should be able to um, exert changes to the physical asset itself. The fourth one is that the digital twin has to be high fidelity. So it has to be able to represent the phenomena with a certain level of fidelity that you want. So if you want to twin your physical asset at the nanoscale, then the model has to be able to represent the physical asset at the nanoscale level. Whereas if you want to just, let's take, for example, a wind turbine, and you want to represent it as well, just from a systems level perspective, you might only need to take the subcomponents of that wind turbine. So the blades, the nacelle, the stem, things like that. Then number five is that the digital twin, should follow the physical asset throughout its life cycle. So the life of a digital twin begins the very
Okay,
moment that
so there's something wrong with the mic again.
Okay, let me just
Yes, it's back now. Okay, that's perfect.
I've taken off my earphone. I'm just going to use the usual microphone for my laptop. Yeah, so
Back to basics.
number four. So we're on point number 4, high fidelity, right? Was that clear or?
That was clear.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. So number 5 is that the model should follow the physical asset throughout its life cycle. And that means that the life of a digital twin begins the very moment that the asset begins to be designed. So the asset is designed, and you have a digital twin that represents that asset. The asset is manufactured, and then that digital twin is updated with how the asset is being manufactured. Then the same thing throughout the operations phase and up to the disposal phase of the product. And then finally, you have to be able to extract some kind of service from the digital twin. So just having a model that is twinning the behavior of your physical asset is not really helpful in itself. So you need to be able to provide some kind of analytics, some kind of prediction, prescription, whatever you want it to be. So those 6 points. Sorry for the audio, but those are the 6 key characteristics that define a digital twin.
I love how you kind of went through each of those, Fran, and explained them in details. And I think I'll just sum them up also as well, because I think you've done it brilliantly. And it's important to know the details. But so if someone is just joining, because I've seen a few people just logging in now, what we're trying to do is really explain what is in a digital twin. And Fran went through each of those, which you can go through the recording again. But in a nutshell, a digital twin is a replica of an actual asset. So it's a replica of it. It has similar features. And I loved how you said it twins to kind of get the information and work on it and replicate, like you can get the analytics afterwards. But basically that is a digital twin. And a digital twin, you gave an example of the aircraft on. Also we can have things like factory, and we'll give examples later on, but one of the very successful examples as well is factory replications, which was done brilliantly but by BMW in the metaverse. But yeah, I think that's in a nutshell. It's a replica of an actual asset that has the similar features, that you can do things and actually test and get the analytics stuff without changing the actual asset. Am I correct with that? Is it a simple sum up, or do you want to add something?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, you theoretically you will also be able to change the asset, I guess, if you had like that
Yes.
bidirectional connection. But in practice, you don't necessarily have to have that to have a digital
Uh,
twin.
that is so cool. So yes, so definitely you can change the asset. What I meant is it gives you the opportunity to do the changes on the virtual bit
All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
and then push it. So it's like a proof of concept
Mm.
test stuff. But yeah, you're so correct. You can definitely change the asset. Okay, so we went through the digital twins, and hopefully everyone listening is up to speed now and understand what is a digital twin. Let's go a bit deep dive into your maturity model. Because if an organization, I'll go through this, which is a bit on your, I love this model. Um, it's basically saying what are the level of maturity for digital twins. And I'll leave you to go through your model. So I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'll leave you to do that.
No. Yeah. Sure. I think it will be also useful to maybe just have a, I don't know, like a bit of clarification about why this model exists, like why we did this model and stuff. Because so we started this kind of research back in 2020, and our goal was to see, kind of to answer the question, how advanced are the applications of digital twin out there? Um, what do digital twins in industry currently look like? How do we compare them? But when we were like trying to um, get some comparable, when we were trying to compare the data, or when we think like, okay, how are we going to compare the digital twin from one company to the digital twin of another company? We found that what's out there right now, or what was out there at the time, the tools that were out there to measure this were really simple, too simplistic. So they basically, the only distinction that they did was, your digital twin has a connection with the physical asset that is one directional, or your physical asset is connected to a digital twin bidirectionally, and then maybe also talking about the analytical capability. So the digital twin is able to give you monitoring capabilities, analytical capabilities, prediction, prescription, whatever. All of those were useful, but they were all mixing something very important, which is the organizational aspect. Many of these how do I say, these tools to measure the maturity of a digital twin just focused on a very small number of technical aspects or technical dimensions that really didn't give you enough breadth and depth to understand really and distinguish the digital twin between two companies in like a meaningful way. So what we did is we did a literature review. We put all of the useful dimensions together of what was already out there, and then we conducted, I think it was like 23 or so interviews with many practitioners, well, 23 practitioners from the aerospace industry. So we interviewed MROs, which are the guys who maintain aircraft and aircraft engines. We interviewed consultants, we interviewed engineers, people from IT, managers. And from that, using a sort of design research methodology, we put together um, a maturity model, which is the one in this paper, which has 10 dimensions. And each dimension has 4 levels. Um, I don't know how to go through it, because I think if I went through like each dimension one by one, it's like that could literally be the topic of like a whole hour of discussion. I think maybe I could talk about the maybe two or three dimensions that are like, I don't know, that were like interesting or surprising. Um, what do you think?
I think, to be honest, thanks first of all for explaining how you came to the model and the interviews and everything. And I did like how you mentioned that it was very the tools available in the market or the maturity models available in the market were more technical, while you were like, okay, hold on for a second. You can't really only measure maturity with technical experience. There are other things that needs to be considered, which is a proper strategy when you're actually trying to get into digital twins. So that was brilliant, Fran. Yeah, I don't think we have the time for the 10 dimensions, to be honest. We can do a separate session, but maybe why don't you just pick the like one or two that you
Yeah.
think are really important, as you suggested, and just walk us through it and say why you think this is really an important dimension. And I'll definitely put a link again for everyone so that they can read the paper.
Yeah. I think I'm going to talk about two dimensions that really were completely ignored in, well, not just the literature, but like in industry in general. So
Mhm.
when if you take like the definition of the digital twin, you have that it has to update synchronously with the asset. But actually, when if you look at the data transmission process more in detail, it's not that the data gets transmitted directly to your digital twin. You first have to collect the data, then you have to transmit it, and then you update your digital twin with it. And something that we actually found out is that, especially in the aerospace industry, there can be humongous differences between the frequency at which you collect your data and the frequency at which you update your models. So we found that actually the data in coming from an aircraft engine, for example, it's collected super quickly. It's collected like millions of times per second, and then all that data is bundled together at the end of each flight. So a lot of data collected very quickly. But then actually, to the time that it takes for that data to be reflected in the digital twins that they have, it can go up to weeks, sometimes months. In some cases, maybe I've heard that it was like half a year or something like that, something ridiculous. So I think
It
if you
does.
wanted to, like from a company perspective, you have to kind of enable, if you really want to be able to provide, say, real time services or services that are um, more time dependent, you need to be able to design and develop that linkage between the data collection and how that and like how timely is that data reflected in the digital twin itself. So that is one. The other one that I wanted to talk about is one that I think is not an issue just um, related to digital twins themselves. I think related to the digitalization movement more in general, which is operational data accessibility. And in this case, the single biggest uh, obstacle between a company or implementing something like a digital twin and not implementing is how much access to data they have. And we found, like, from these interviews that there are four uh, five kind of levels of this. So you can basically like have no data accessibility, to no access to data whatsoever, which actually is the case for many of these companies. The other one is that the companies are trying to discuss with the customer, which in this case will be the airline, or I guess in other industries like the renewables industry would be probably the energy utilities provider, whoever owns the, the wind turbines. Um, but it will be have like putting efforts to get access to that data. So you still don't have access to the data, but you're actually actively trying to get access to it. The other situation, which is probably the most common, well, no, it is the most common, is having restricted access to data. So the customer tells you what data you have available at your disposition and who has access to that data within the company. And this is about 50%. Like, we found that about 50% of companies are like in this kind of situation at the moment. Then one level up, one level above will be the company has full access, complete access to the data. Anyone in the company can use all of the data that they want, however they want, whenever they want. And then like the absolute holy grail will be that the OEM has full access to the data. The reason why operational data accessibility is so important, and being able to get this right is so important, is because it's without the data you just can't do a digital twin. And we found that there's actually two issues. This issue of accessibility is divided in two levels as well. You can have issues in terms of the company as a whole getting access to the data, but also a really big blocker in terms of being able to implement a digital twin is accessibility of data within the company. So being able to share the data between departments, and it happens in many contracts that one department will be the one with access to the data, and then another department who could very well benefit from the data just doesn't have it. Companies are working on solving those problems, but they won't come anytime soon from what we see.
I know. Well, and I've seen in different organizations how challenging it is. And the idea to be honest, it's not only in digital twins, implementing any future technology, whether it's machine learning, AI, digital twins, when you speak about data, even simple visualizations and, setting up something very simple is a challenge because functions are somehow careful about what they share, as you said, in this idea of no, it's my data, you can't have access to it. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, I think silos is a bit of a challenge. Some organizations are definitely better than others. I've seen that. But overall, it is a challenge. I loved how you highlighted accessibility, and I love the model as a whole. And I think, to be honest, you've measured it, but also it gives the ability to organizations, and I'm speaking from a data strategy perspective here, Fran, the organizations to kind of look at this model and see if they are ready for digital twins or not. Because a lot of organization will be thinking, well, people are doing digital twins, I need to do digital twins as well. And your model gives a clear direction of saying, are you ready to do it for digital twin? Or maybe the right answer for your data strategy is, hold on for a second, it's a good idea, I need it, but not now. Maybe it's in the next 2 years. Or 5 years, because as you said, a simple example is the data accessibility. But there are other things as well in your model which are brilliant. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's a very...
No, thank you. I think, the interesting thing that we found while trying to do this is that it's very difficult to answer. Like, it's not useful to answer it's not useful to ask the question, do I have a digital twin or do I not? Like, from a business perspective, it actually doesn't matter. Ultimately, what matters is what capabilities do you have? What are you able to do? How much freedom do you have to do what you want? And ultimately, how is all that together combining to provide value to your organization, right? And so this maturity model is interesting because it is a maturity model, but at the same time, it kind of isn't, because there's so many different combinations that you can have for each dimension. So you could say that it makes sense to say that you are very mature across a certain number of dimensions, but whether you can say that your digital twin is very mature or not is a bit of a more blurry concept. I guess if like most of your dimensions are very very mature, if you're very mature across most of the dimensions, you could maybe claim that. But let's say, for example, let's take the example that you are very mature across all the dimensions, 9 dimensions. So you have like level 4, level 5 across all dimensions. And then it turns out that if you take the the business, but then it turns out that for the business level affected dimension, you are on just affecting processes in the organization, then what transformation is, like, what value are you actually extracting from the digital twin? There is so much potential that you could be extracting other than just affecting processes in the organization. You could be maybe feeding that information to improve your products, or you could also be providing new business models. So whether your digital twin is mature or not takes a bit, like, the maturity model is helpful, but you can't say just because I'm mature in like X number of dimensions, I have a mature digital twin. Yeah. The other thing that this is useful for is for comparing across companies. So you take the like benchmarking, like we did in this study. So you take so we compared across. Well, it is interesting. Is this something that you want to like maybe talk about? I think it ties quite well.
Yeah. Maybe just because again, I think it's brilliant because it ties well with moving even generating value. So maybe you can
Yeah.
walk us through this in. So yeah, please share
No,
it.
yeah. No, yeah, like something interesting that we found is that so when we were mapping the digital twin for each of the companies that we interviewed, we found that none of them were, like, no company was very mature across all the dimensions. We found that each company was very good at a very specific set of dimensions, better than all the other companies. So in the end, like, the way that the maturity model looked when you overlaid all of the data for each of the companies, that each company had like a spike on each bit. So I don't know. I don't know if they did that on purpose or if they didn't, but it seems like each company is differentiating themselves in a very specific across a very specific dimension of the digital twin.
It's interesting, and it kind of really it makes sense because normally organizations will be have their strengths sometimes, and it's not necessary that they're strong in an area. I'm just thinking out loud here. Strong in an area that they'll be strong in the other, but it's interesting that you're saying they're quite. Every organization has a spike in one of the elements, so that is really interesting. Um, but maybe talk us a bit more about those organizations, and it'd be interesting to see how they generate value from digital twins and maybe bring to the listener some of the examples of a true digital twin. I know that you spoke about aeronautical, you spoke about the engine, you spoke about a lot of things, but maybe we can give even more example and bring it to life when it comes to generating value.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, actually, this. So I was thinking of maybe giving the example from the aerospace industry because it's like this in the report that we
Please.
did. But actually, I was last week. I was at a meeting by the Digital Twin Consortium in Leeds,
Oh,
and
okay. I'm interested now. You need to tell me more about that.
yeah, honestly, it was great. I got to meet a lot of very interesting people from different industries, from different universities. It really great. But there was one particular example of well, of a digital twin application, which I thought was super great, and it really shows like the value that you can get out of it. So this digital twin was um, a company called Slingshot Simulation, I think. I think they're like a spin-off of Leeds University, and they are collaborating with the council of some town in the middle of the UK. I can't remember. I can't actually remember the name of the town. But basically, they're building. They are building a digital twin of that town, um, and, uh, and the way that they get the data is by giving people like an app that collects data about like where they're moving, and like people can report if something is wrong or if something's happening in the city. But essentially, they have like this 3D model of like dynamic 3D model of the city, and what they're doing with it is that they are using it to make policy decisions. Um, of like how to, well, for example, they've now decided they use that to make policy decisions on like where to put the solar panels for the houses in that city, based on like how people are moving through that city, how the houses are oriented, things like that. And all of this like crowdsourced source data. And there was like a very interesting discussion afterwards about how the application of digital twins might even change how decision making is made in a well, from a policy level, right? Like being able to involve the public in or being able to be more transparent in how decision making happens to the public, or even being able to make the public a participant in how policy making is done. There was someone who raised an idea saying, well, they suggested, what if this data set was made available to the public so that people could run their own analysis on it in their own computer, and then provide those suggestions or the results of those analysis to the council, so that then in a way like these pages for signing the petition signing, but for analysis run on the digital twin. So anyway, very cool. I thought that really highlighted like the value that digital twins can have, not just from the well, in this case, in policy decision making. But let's take it then back. I know that it's 7:32, but this is like so cool. And then let's take it back then to the example of digital twins of assets. So the digital twin of an aircraft engine. What we found.
Yes.
Sorry?
Tell us more about that. Yes, tell us more about that, because that is also as well. I mean, it's interesting to see it in policies, also interesting to see it in asset. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the value, there are a few things. For the you can split it into two sides. You can divide it into internal benefit for the company itself and external benefits. So the value for the customer, value for the company, value for the customer. In terms of value for the company, most of the things that they told us is that they can extend the capabilities of the product. So by having access to the real-time data or the real-time behavior of the product, they're able to adjust how it behaves in real time. They're able to make the product more dynamic, things like that. They're also having the digital twin also allows the companies to change and update their business model towards a more servitized solution. And this is especially relevant for, or this was like a big point of discussion for especially aircraft manufacturers, because it's really interesting because they found out that if they collected data from how their planes are flying, they now were able to provide consulting services that were outside of the remit of aerospace, just because they have all of that modeling expertise, and they know how they know the process of how to like build digital twins. They now like provide services like on how to build digital twins to other industries. So super cool. And then there's like the more how do I say, the more obvious ones, like saving labor costs, predicting inventory, predicting cash flow, things like this. But actually, the most interesting thing that we found, and also is like, this is a big reason why I am doing my current research, is that when we asked these companies, how are you measuring the value that you're getting out of the digital twin, no one was able to give us an answer. So there is no way of directly measuring, currently there's no way of directly measuring the value that a digital twin has. They weren't able to identify the direct financial implications of applying the digital twin. They were not able to tell us like how they were going to go about it. And instead, they could only tell us that one of the key problems that they were having in getting funding for implementing a digital twin was that they didn't have a clear business case for it. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting that that's happening in the aeronautical industry or the auto because I'll let you finish first, and then I'll give an example from the one of the OEMs, the automotive OEMs,
No, yeah,
because
go for it.
we're having.
I think that was a good
But
place for
fin-
me to like finish.
so I think one of the this is an example that I'm going to share linking digital twin with the metaverse.
Right.
But one of the automotive companies, they did, and again, speak about what is a digital twin and having this virtual asset of a real asset. So their real asset was the factory. Their virtual asset was a replica of their own factory
Mm.
floor. And they wanted to do changes in the factory floor, but they didn't know if it's the right thing to do or not. So they did this on their digital twin. They've done the changes and they've done it in a very different layout compared to the normal automotive layout. They didn't disclose what they've done because now this is when it comes to the business value, because they want to own the right to know, like it's for them, it's a benefit for the organization. They've changed the layout of the factory, which improved efficiency, and they started training but that's a bit when I get into the metaverse. They started training their own employees using the metaverse. But I think this was an interesting benefit because all of a sudden the replica of the factory has changed, and then
Mm.
they moved it back when you said, remember when you start when you, at the start when you said, oh, you can change the physical asset. So they did the physical asset change after they tested it. um but yeah, it's interesting that some companies, and maybe when they generated the business value from it, while you're saying in aeronautical it's not the same. So it's
Yeah.
interesting how different industries have different experiences.
Yeah, it's quite important to make the distinction in terms of like the type of digital twin that you're making, because when it's a digital twin of a process or a manufacturing digital twin, things are a lot more advanced than with product digital twins. And this is like
True as well.
what we were trying to focus in this report, because yeah, like with in manufacturing, digital twins are super advanced right now. The value is very clear. There's so many case studies. There's so much stuff out there showing, hey, if you have a model of your production line, you can rearrange it. You can do whatever you want. And the thing is, within that area of the digital twin of a manufacturing line, the data is owned by the company. So their operational data accessibility is not that much of an issue. Whereas the
True.
digital twin of a product is a much bigger headache in terms of like making it happen, because there's so many different stakeholders in how that data is being made available, because there's competing interests everywhere. It's not just the that the OEM wants to collect the data.
Mm.
They are in direct competition with with the MROs who maintain the product, because they also want to make a digital twin of the engine and they don't want to share the data with the OEM. So now there's like a bit of a tug of war between them, where so where no one wants to share the data with anyone else. And how do you solve that issue? And there's been a few discussions, or there's like more and more research that looks at how potentially blockchain could be used to solve this issue by anonymizing data, and how and also and there are companies, I think like IoTech, who are building like APIs for companies to be able to seamlessly share parts um, of their data with other companies. But you still kind of find yourself in a sort of similar situation over and over again, where the interests of one company are at odds with the interest of another company. So how do they come to an agreement in how they share the data?
That is true. It's sharing cross organization is not the easiest as well. um I'm just aware of the time. I mean, I really enjoyed it, Fran. I
So
think
yeah,
we didn't even go through everything we've prepared, or we were supposed to go through. But it's just, I think digital twins is such a rich topic,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're really an expert when it comes to it. So I'd encourage anyone who has any questions about digital twins to reach out to Fran. I'll You can find him on LinkedIn and on the University of Cambridge website as well. Feel free to reach out to him, ask him questions. And yeah, Fran and I are in the research group. So if there's anything related to digital twin, data analytics, or data strategy, we'll definitely be able to support you. But thank you very much, Fran. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks for everyone who joined us. I can see people attending on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So thank you for everyone who joined us. If you're watching on replay, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and either Fran or I will pick the questions up definitely, and we'll answer them. Thank you again, Fran, and thanks everyone.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. I see you all next in the next live session in November.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Bye.